Israeli airstrikes reportedly targeted multiple areas and targets in central Syria, killing at least 14 people and wounding many more. According to Syrian media, waves of airstrikes struck in the province of Hama, causing damage to a precision rocket manufacturing plant. Meanwhile, a Hezbollah UAV soared a direct hit on an Israeli apartment building in Nahariya without causing injuries. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The overnight airstrikes targeted multiple areas and targets in central Syria, killing at least 14 and wounding dozens. According to Syrian state media, waves of airstrikes struck in the province of Hama, causing damage to infrastructure at military sites. The airstrikes deep in Syria were alleged to be carried out by Israel. The strikes hit multiple targets in the Meisaf area of Hama, used as a base for Iranian forces and pro-Iranian militias. One of the specific targets was said to be the Scientific Studies and Research Center used to produce precision surface-to-surface missiles. The IDF had no comment on the Syrian strikes. The alleged Israeli strike in Syria came amid intense cross-border tit-for-tat attacks with Hezbollah. The Lebanese terrorists shelled northern Israel, and the Air Force struck launchers and terror infrastructure in South Lebanon. Overnight, the Air Force hit targets in Kafar Kila, Taibe, Hanin, and Yarin. This morning, a Hezbollah UAV scored a direct hit on the 14th floor of an apartment building in the northern coastal city of Nahariya. No one was injured. Meeting troops on day 339 of the war in Gaza, Defense Minister Gallant said that the IDF weight of balance may soon shift to the north.
אנחנו בעזה צריכים להשיג את שתי המטרות שלנו, גם לחסל את החמאס וגם להחזיר את החטופים, ואנחנו על העניין הזה בכל הכוח. במקביל לנושא הזה, אנחנו מסתכלים על כל הזירה, וזה אומר שבזמן שאתם נלחמים כאן בעזה, אנחנו נערכים גם לכל דבר שיכול לקרות בצפון, והעברת מרכז כובד יכולה להיות מהירה ויכולה לכלול גם אתכם, בלוח זמנים קצר. ואנחנו ערוכים לכל האפשרויות האלה.
Gallant also indicated that the war effort in Gaza was not nearly complete.
כאן אנחנו נמשיך ונלחץ ונכה את חמאס ונשחוק אותה ונחסל את החמאס, וגם נגיע למוחמד סנואר וגם ליחיא סנואר. וכל האנשים האלה, המחבלים הארורים האלה, אנחנו נגיע. וכל מי שחושב אחרת, שיסתכל על מרואן עיסא ועל מוחמד דף, גם הם חשבו שהם חסינים, הם לא איתנו היום.
The forces of Division 162 continue to operate in the Rafah area. They've eliminated terrorists, raided terror infrastructure, and located many weapons in the area. Despite IDF efforts, Hamas managed to launch 2 rockets from Gaza toward Ashkelon in South Israel. One rocket was intercepted by air defense, and the other landed in the sea. An airstrike eliminated terrorist Raf Omer Salman Abu Shab, the commander of the rocket unit in the destroyed Khan Yunis Brigade.
The deadly murder of 3 Israelis at the Allenby Bridge brought attention to the challenge of Iranian organized arms smuggling from Jordan to terrorists in Judea and Samaria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The deadly terror attack at the Allenby Bridge that murdered 3 Israeli civilian workers has focused attention on the growing terror threat along the expansive border between Israel and Jordan. Security measures on the bridge are part of the IDF effort to prevent weapons smuggling since October 7th. 3 Israeli civilian workers were murdered in the attack when a lone Jordanian terrorist with a smuggled handgun arrived at the crossing in a truck and opened fire at the Israeli workers at the bridge.
זה יום קשה. מחבל נתעב רצח בדם קר 3 מאזרחינו בגשר אלנבי. אני שולח בשם הממשלה ובשמי תנחומים למשפחות הנרצחים.
Prior to October 7th, there were already a wave of emerging terror attacks in Judea and Samaria. This was fueled by smuggled weapons, primarily rifles, that were getting into the hands of terrorists in Jenin and other areas in northern Samaria. Over the last 2 years, smuggling from Jordan has increased greatly and includes weapons and materials used in explosives. Iran is behind some of the activities designed to destabilize the Kingdom of Jordan and use it to move weapons and threats closer to Israel.
אנחנו מוקפים באידיאולוגיה רצחנית שמובלת על ידי ציר הרשע של איראן. בימים האחרונים מחבלים נתעבים רצחו 6 מחטופינו בדם קר ו3 משוטרי משטרת ישראל. הרוצחים אינם מבחינים בינינו. הם רוצים לרצוח את כולנו, עד האחרון שבינינו. ימין ושמאל, חילונים ודתיים, יהודים ולא יהודים. מה שמונע את השמדת עמנו כבימים עברו הוא עוצמתה של מדינת ישראל וכוחו של צבא ההגנה לישראל.
In Amman, the Jordanian capital, hundreds marched downtown to salute the Jordanian terrorist who murdered these 3 Israeli civilian workers at the Allenby Bridge before being shot and killed by Israeli security forces. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The Jordanians celebrated the murders with fireworks and by offering sweets while hailing the 39-year-old terrorist truck driver who came from a Bedouin tribe in southern Jordan.
جاء رد عفوي ليقول لنتنياهو وللصهاينة إن كنتم تعتقدون أن الأردن خاسرة سهلة ضعيفة فأنتم واهمون وهذا إنذار أولي وإن صبر الأردنيين بدأ ينفد فلا تختبروا صبرهم والأيام قادمة.
According to initial indications, the gunmen arrived at the Israeli side of the border crossing after passing a security check on the Jordanian and Israeli side. Jordanian officials say they are investigating the shooting at the crossing, also known as the King Hussein Bridge.
وزارة الداخلية إن الجهات الرسمية باشرت التحقيق في حادثة إطلاق النار التي وقعت على الجانب الآخر من جسر الملك حسين.
Jordan says it's temporarily closed the bridge. Jordanian officials transported standard travelers back to Amman after Israel closed all of its land border crossings with Jordan.
And joining us today in studio is Sarit Zahavi, founder and president of the Alma Research and Education Center, which focuses on analyzing security challenges along Israel's northern borders and educating key influencers. Sarit, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we are hearing, Sarit, that Yoav Gallant said that the army will soon be shifting focus from Gaza to the north. What do you think of this statement? Is it about time?
Look, I live 9 kilometers from Lebanon. We heard these statements many times since this war started. And I think when you have to shoot, don't talk. We don't need more statements. We just need deeds to bring the people back home.
Well, since you mentioned on a personal level that this is where you live, what is it like? Tell me a little bit of what is it like to be living in the north, that close, and being under threats all the time?
It means that we hear the blasts, we hear the interceptions, we hear the drones. It means that we send the kids to school and we feel that we are playing with their lives. It means that every time there is, a sound of a motorbike, we need to check whether it's not the sirens. It means that we don't have enough time to get to the shelters because we have 15 seconds to get to the shelter and it's never enough unless you're right at the door. It means that our children don't have safe rooms in their schools and they were instructed to go below the tables once they hear the sirens. This is an unbearable reality and it shouldn't be this way.
Absolutely not. We're sometimes seeing more than 50 rockets in a single strike. Do you think that this escalation will continue?
Yes, there is no reason why it wouldn't. I think that the basic interest of Hezbollah is to preserve its achievement and maybe even expand its achievement from the beginning of the war that caused to the evacuation of 60,000 Israelis. We have 60,000 people that are displaced in Israel. They don't see a prospect of when they will be able to come home, and about 200,000 more that are living like myself.
Do you think that it was the right move to evacuate these 60,000?
I think we cannot judge the government about this one because the fears, and I was part of that back then at the beginning of October, were huge. Radwan Brigades, the elite unit of Hezbollah, was completely prepared to launch a massacre just like Hamas, and actually its original plan was replicated by Hamas. Hamas had done exactly what Radwan Brigades had planned to do, and nobody could promise us that they would not do that, so I think this was the safest thing to do back then, but at the same time, strategy is needed, and we need to build some kind of plan of how do we bring the people back home, and this was supposed to happen long ago.
So you mentioned that on October 7th and prior to that, there was a plan, just like the Hamas plan, to strike Israel from the north in a very similar way. Why do you think they didn't go through with it?
I also want to emphasize that this plan included the idea of taking people as hostages to become human shields. It was published in a video about 10 years ago, in a propaganda video of Hezbollah, that nobody believed that they were capable of that. But they were deployed on the border. Radwan brigades were on the border. We could see them every day. When I was on the border every day, I could see them. I think there could be two options. Either they didn't know about the exact timing of Hamas and they were surprised by the exact timing, and afterwards it was too late because Hamas was very successful and Hezbollah didn't want to be second once Hamas was that successful. At the same time, the communities became empty very, very quickly, and IDF came up very, very quickly. So the chances to get the same achievement became much smaller than what Hamas had accomplished.
But do you believe that this threat still exists, that this still could be executed?
Yes, because the other option is that the Hezbollah and Iran wanted to have their own campaign and send Hamas first and then see what happened. And actually, I think that what is happening now serves the basic rationale of Hezbollah and Iran, and actually what we say is the Shiite axis, because what they want to cause, their end goal, is to bring the destruction of the state of Israel. But they understand that they cannot do that just in military means. And that's why their basic strategy is to create a war of attrition in various fronts. You see what happened yesterday in the Allenby Gate. This is all part of the same plan.
What do you expect of the government to be doing in order to avoid these kind of threats? Not even just the rocket threats, the daily rocket threats, but also threats that we mention here of an October 7th style kind of attack.
I think that for now, Hezbollah is not striving to send thousands of terrorists the same as Hamas, because IDF is very much prepared. They could try to infiltrate with less powers. What the government should do, much more in any aspect, with defense, with offense, and with international community collaboration. All of these are going together hand in hand, and none of this is being done enough.
So it's not enough, according to you. There's significant debate about how to handle Hezbollah, and if this conflict escalates, a war erupts. Do you believe that there should be boots on the ground in Lebanon, Israeli soldiers going in physically with boots on the ground?
Look,
or
it is already war. Mm-hmm. It is already war for 60,000 people that are not in their homes.
It absolutely
is. So the big question is, how do we stop it and make sure that we bring them security? I personally think that the only way to do it is to make sure that the international community is supporting us. That's the basic. Afterwards, we can discuss whether it's boots on the ground or just the Air Force or maybe a diplomatic arrangement or I don't know what. Mm-hmm. But as long as we don't have the basic understanding of what we are dealing with, and there are still talkings about Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is not the case in the north, not the case everywhere, but specifically not in the north, mm-hmm. I think that we are not going to get to any progress. The first thing that should be done is that all of us will understand what we are facing. And then, even if we go to any kind of diplomatic arrangement, it cannot fool us again. It cannot be a fiction again like the previous one in 2006. It should be something that have a very clear deadline, that have a very clear goals, that everybody understands that Hezbollah should be disarmed, and the capabilities of Hezbollah should be eliminated this way or another.
Now, how realistic is that Hezbollah will be disarmed? It's
hardly.
Very difficult.
Hardly.
A very difficult objective to achieve. And still, even if some kind of a diplomatic solution will be reached, will that give you, residents of the North, Israelis, a sense of security that you could go back home?
If it will be based on previous solutions, so the answer is clearly no. Since UNIFIL and Lebanese army are not the answer, they are not willing, each of them for different reasons, are not willing to clash with Hezbollah. So any diplomatic arrangement should be based on an international force, whatever it is, that will be willing to clash with Hezbollah. Otherwise, I agree with you, the chances are very low. And eventually we may end up with an escalation to something very, very different to what we experienced up until now. It's going to be much more difficult. The terrain in Lebanon is much more difficult. It's much bigger than Gaza. The Hezbollah is much more experienced than Hamas, and it's going to take longer. So I'm not sure we are interested in that, But at the same time, I'm positive that we must go forward and stop shuffling.
Do you believe that if a hostage for ceasefire deal is somehow reached, it doesn't look like it right now, but if it is somehow reached, will that stop the fire in the north?
It will stop the fire temporarily. I believe Nasrallah only in this. He is a good liar in other aspects. But I think that it's not going to bring us security, basic security.
And
because immediately Hezbollah will recover. If nobody is monitoring, Hezbollah will recover and will be capable of launching the massacre that it planned.
When do you think that residents of the north will be going back home?
Wow, that's the question that I ask every morning when I get up, and I truly don't know.
It's a very sad reality for a lot of these Israelis, 60,000 residents in the north, as you say, and of course we have many more in the south that have been displaced all year. And you told us a little bit in the beginning about what it's like to live under threat, to live in the north. Maybe you can elaborate about what you tell yourself in order to keep waking up in the morning under a very harsh reality, what you tell your children.
Look, at the first day of school, at September 1st, my little girl, she's 11 years old, she came back and she said, "Mommy, they told us to go beneath the tables. Do you think it's effective?" And, you know, on the one hand, I want to give her the reality. I don't want to lie to her. And on the other hand, I do have to present resilience and not to make her afraid anymore. And to hear all these blasts around us, my dog already broke 2 doors. It's not the nice, peaceful village that I used to live in. I'll put it this way. The only way to find resilience is to look at the Israelis, actually, to tell you the truth. Like, my center is composed of Israelis from the various sects, religions, backgrounds, and political opinions. Mm-hmm. And the Western Gully by itself is the same. And we live together, and we are very proud of that. And this gives me a lot of hope.
Well, hopefully the peace will come to your region and to the entire state of Israel. Thank you very much for being here today. Now, hostage for ceasefire talks are stalled, and there are no signs of a breakthrough in sight. According to Israeli media reports, an Israeli negotiator told families of hostages that a deal is now considered unlikely. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The chances of a phased hostage for ceasefire deal on the basis of Israel's May proposal are close to zero. That's the word from an Israeli negotiator who reportedly told hostage families that the hostage deal is unlikely. Channel 12 News reports that there was very broad pessimism in the Israeli security establishment for a deal to be struck. The U.S. had indicated it was planning to present a new last-chance bridging proposal in the coming days, but are now reportedly unlikely to do so. According to sources quoted in the report, Prime Minister Netanyahu's press conference insisting on Israeli control of the Philadelphia axis complicated matters, and Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's hardening of his positions have buried chances for an agreement. Channel 12 adds that families of hostages with dual Israeli-American citizenship are also hearing from the Biden administration that it's less optimistic than it was a week ago. At that time, they were saying that they were working hard and fast on a new proposal. Mass protests are continuing, organized by families of hostages held in Gaza since October 7th. The protesters demand that the government do more to bring their loved ones home.
What we see over the last week is that the hostages are dying, actually being murdered. The families are getting sick and are suffering, and the entire Israel is sick. The only medicine is to bring back the hostages, those alive for recovery and the dead for proper burial. The people of Israel are going out to the street to demand from the government, bring them all back now.
72 hostages have reportedly been killed on October 7th with their bodies taken to Gaza or while in Hamas captivity. 101 hostages remain in captivity in the Gaza Strip. 97 of them were abducted on October 7th, and the other 4 hostages were captured earlier.
Israeli ministers are under renewed criticism for visiting the Temple Mount without explicit approval from Prime Minister Netanyahu, as security officials warn that any change in the status quo could lead to a surge in violence across the region. More on this from ILTV's editor-in-chief, Mayan Hoffman.
Israeli ministers should not visit the Temple Mount without direct approval. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated this message during a security cabinet meeting on Sunday, according to a statement from his office. Netanyahu emphasized that the status quo on the Temple Mount will remain unchanged, following recent controversy over an Israeli minister's public visit and comments from far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who supports allowing Jewish prayer on the Mount. Reports suggest that the police have been allowing Jewish prayer at the site, marking a potential de facto change to the long-standing policy. On Sunday, Yitzhak Kreuzer, a member of Ben-Gvir's Otzma Yehudit party, visited the Temple Mount and prayed. Israel's security chiefs have warned that growing Palestinian anger over Jewish prayer at the site could spark significant violence in Judea, Samaria, and even in Jerusalem. President Isaac Herzog, in a meeting with U.S. Ambassador Jack Lew, also reinforced his commitment to maintaining the status quo, in line with political agreements made with Jordan in 1967 and rulings by religious authorities over the past century. Under the agreement reached after the Six-Day War, Jews are allowed to visit the Temple Mount, but not to pray there. Visiting the Mount remains a controversy even within the religious community. The chief rabbinate opposes visits, citing concerns that Jews could unintentionally enter forbidden areas under Jewish law, while some Zionist rabbis argue that updated measurements post-1967 have clarified which parts of the Mount Jews may access and that Jews should pray there.
A new report from the Anti-Defamation League reveals that Israelis are worried about traveling abroad, but it's not just flight delays they're concerned about. What's behind their fears? Here's ILTV's Mayan Hoffman with more.
Many international airlines are resuming flights in and out of Israel, but a new survey by the Anti-Defamation League shows most Israelis still feel unsafe traveling abroad as Israelis. According to the survey, first reported by the Jerusalem Post, 80% of Israelis believe they may face unfair treatment or even be targeted simply for being Israeli when traveling. The survey, which polled over 500 Israelis, also found that nearly one-third, 31%, have personally experienced discrimination or know someone who has because they are Israeli. Additionally, 81% of Israelis expressed general concern about the rising wave of anti-Semitism worldwide. The survey follows a series of previous reports on the rise of anti-Semitism. In July, the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights reported a 400% spike in anti-Semitic incidents since the Gaza war began in October 2023. And a separate survey by the American Jewish Committee in February revealed that 22% more American Jews feel less secure in the U.S. compared to the previous year.
Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines crafted with generations of expertise.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 23 degrees Celsius or 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies and warm weather are expected, as temperatures should reach highs of 33 degrees Celsius or 92 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.